Welcome to the next episode of The Lens of the Rock. The furnace room is slowly filling with the precious heat of lava. The efficient cart continues to operate smoothly, descending into the depths to transport the lava to the upper floor. It's impressive how the ingenuity and skill of the dwarves have allowed the creation of this complex infrastructure. The furnace room is a masterpiece of engineering where each piece fits perfectly to accomplish the assigned task. The forgotten beast, Esnust, has been recovering after two intense battles in the caverns against the fearsome beasts Dentha and Pob, as well as 9 other victims left in her wake. Although she has suffered some consequences, including damage to several sensory nerves, Esnust remains the undisputed queen of the first level of the caves. Meanwhile, Inglas, the giant magpie, is feared by all those who inhabit the second level of the caves. Since her first screech was heard, she has spread terror among the smaller creatures. Inglas has caused the death of a huge number of living beings, leaving a trail of destruction in her path. Despite her strength and ferocity, the beast has suffered significant injuries and is clearly weary. She has faced numerous creatures and yet emerged victorious, accumulating a total of 57 victims in her path. Each one has been taken from the world by the relentless beast. Ushria, a crossbow soldier of the Forgefire squad, is going through a difficult period in her life. Despite her aggressive appearance, Ushria has fallen into a deep depression. The soldier doesn't show introversion. On the contrary, her sadness leads her to insult and despise her fellow dwarves. The Forgefire squad is aware of Ushria's situation and has allowed her to skip several trainings so she can rest and recover from her depression. However, the situation remains concerning. Ushria is 40 years old, married to Aesob, and has 2 other lovers. She is a dwarf who values stoicism and peace, possesses good intuition, and is patient in complicated situations. Despite disliking competition, Ushria is prone to easily getting angry, which may explain part of her current behavior. Her companions are worried about her and want to help in any way possible. Her challenging and aggressive attitude is unusual for her, leading to the belief that something is deeply disturbing her. The Forgefire squad hopes that with time and proper help, Ushria can recover and become the brave and competent soldier she has always been. However, hope fades quickly when Ushria, consumed by uncontrolled rage, starts insulting everyone in her path. The fight erupts in one of the local temples, and the citizens, tired of her bravado, decide to take action, leaving her with many broken teeth and severe injuries. Despite her weakness, Ushria continues to advance towards the hospital, striking anyone in her way. Several dwarves try to stop her, but without success, and amidst the confusion and violence, one of them is accidentally pushed into a well, falling into the void and splashing water across multiple levels. Meanwhile, Ushria continues to bleed profusely while another dwarf tries to immobilize her, eventually bringing her to the hospital bed. However, Ushria inevitably dies without receiving urgent care due to the serious injuries she caused to the doctor, who lies unconscious, desperately waiting for someone to rescue her. In a blink of an eye, Ingish the innkeeper also sinks irretrievably into the dark waters of the cave, fighting for his life in vain. At 43 years old, Ingish leaves behind a heartbroken wife and 2 children who can't believe their father has died in such a tragic way. The innkeeper's body will never be recovered, and his family will be forced to accept the loss and continue their lives without him. Back above ground, the tragedy seemed to have no end in that small community. After the deaths of Ushria and the innkeeper, a new body appears on the ground. This time it's the captain of the squad, the Rock's host, Avuz Rabingis, one of Ushria's lovers. Filled with grief and rage, he began to unleash his fury against all the citizens of the town, blaming them for the death of his lover. However, the dwarves were united and determined not to allow any more violence. They defended themselves bravely against the captain, who finally became so gravely injured that he succumbed shortly after. The news of the captain's death quickly spread throughout the fortress, and while some felt relieved to be free of his wrath and violence, others lamented his tragic end. But all agreed that these spirals of violence could spell the downfall of the underground city. The deaths had left a profound impact on the community. But not only that, the situation was even more critical as the fortress found itself in a vulnerable position due to internal problems arising. The citizens were aware that a small failure in a possible goblin attack could mean extinction. Therefore, it was decided to close the fortress once more to address the internal issues, complete the armament of the last squad, and calm the nerves. One of the first steps to try to forget the cycle of recent deaths was the completion of the mausoleums. Each of them had been built with great care and dedication, reflecting the personality and legacy of each fallen dwarf. The tomb of Ingish, the beloved innkeeper, was situated in a more frequented area. There the citizens could honor his memory and remember his kindness and good deeds. His tomb only contained a commemorative gravestone, but it was enough to recall his life and legacy in the fortress. Meanwhile, his body decomposed in the caverns, visible to curious children through the well. In the furnace room, the dwarves got to work on building the first workstations. Although they hadn't filled all the lava gaps, they made progress in some key areas. Specifically, they established a smelter and 2 forges to start forging armor and completing the equipment for the rookie squad, the Pink Trumpets. The news that Obok, the newly recruited dwarf who had taken Ushria's place in the squad, had fallen into a deep depression, spread like wildfire among her fellow dwarves. Concern quickly spread, especially when they realized that Ushria had also experienced a similar depression before her death. The coincidence that both dwarves had gone through the same situation made the dwarves begin to suspect that some kind of curse might be affecting the vacant squad position. The tension was palpable, and many wondered if the violent events of the past had left an indelible mark on the unit. Obok felt trapped in her own mind, immersed in a deep depression that seemed never-ending. She knew she needed to do something to break free from her vulnerable state and decided to ask the captain of the guard to allow her to skip daily training to dedicate herself to sculpting a statue. The captain, concerned about Obok's mental health, decided to grant her permission. The news quickly spread throughout the fortress, and many dwarves were aware of what was happening with their fellow soldier. A few days ago, the captain and his wife, the mayor of the fortress, had started building a dungeon in anticipation of possible uprisings. For the moment, they had only completed 1 cell, but this was no ordinary cell. The cell, designed as a rehabilitation room rather than a prison, had all the necessary comforts, including a bed, a table, and a chair for dining. In the center of the room, covered by a girl admiring its beauty, lay the chain called Unalcedor Voth Dakal, an artifact created with the finest agate stones of beautiful colors. Although the chain was not very valuable, its beauty and the serene and welcoming atmosphere of the room would help Obok recover from her depression if the need arose. The fortress had always been a place of unity and brotherhood, and all the dwarves considered themselves brothers and children of Glovetmute, their home fortress. Together, they dreamed of reclaiming it someday. With this goal in mind, the dwarves worked tirelessly, caring for each other and making sure everyone was in the best possible condition to face any challenge that arose. Obok ended up constructing an exceptional stone statue representing Mikot being slain by Stozu the goblin. Mikot was one of the first dwarves impaled at the fortress gates by the goblins in the year 62 during what is known as the Siege of Danger. The statue is surrounded by a horde of goblins, reminding the soldiers of the reason for their fight. Placing her latest creation in a prominent place didn't calm Obok, who continued causing problems. The captain of the guard reviewed the backlog of complaints, closing Ushria's case as there was no one left to judge, but Obok had accumulated 5 complaints, 1 for vandalism and 4 for disturbing the public order, some involving violence. With many witnesses, the captain of the guard summons Obok for interrogation and processing. After a harsh questioning, Obok confesses everything. After following the appropriate procedures, she is sentenced to 57 days in prison, and the one in charge of watching over her is none other than the mayor. Obok, feeling nostalgic while observing her creation, decides to surrender, but at the last moment she resists. The mayor, being more experienced in combat than Obok and with the help of other guards, manages to subdue her without excessive violence, only breaking one of her legs and injuring her hip. The medic transfers her to the hospital for recovery before entering prison. The deafening croak of Esnust, the giant toad, resonated through every corner and crevice of the cavern, responded by a new sound. The forgotten beast, Asita, had arrived. An enormous three-eyed beetle with aquamarine-colored eyes. Its dark cinnamon-colored exoskeleton was rough and cracked. Beware of its fire. Asita advanced towards Esnust, who was already injured. Upon encountering each other, Asita stepped back a few paces, ready for the confrontation, and when Esnust attacked with her sticky tongue, the giant beetle quickly moved and evaded the blow. The battle was epic, full of acrobatic movements and deadly attacks from both sides. The giant toad used her strength and agility to try to crush Asita, while the giant beetle relied on its speed and flames to burn the amphibian. The walls of the caverns trembled with each blow, and the air was filled with roars and smoke. Finally, Asita managed to gain an advantage over Esnust thanks to her fire. With each burst of flames, the giant toad weakened and her skin started to crack and burn. But Esnust didn't give up and continued fighting fiercely until she finally fell to the ground, charred and lifeless. Asita, victorious, moved away from the fire and the body of the giant toad. Despite the fierceness of the battle, the giant beetle barely had scratches and felt invincible. But she didn't have time to celebrate as the roar of Obi, a beakless giant chicken with large jaws and irregular grey feathers, echoed through the cavern. Beware of its fire. The caverns resounded with the sound of flames and the roars of the giants as Obi approached Asita, the giant beetle. The two monsters faced each other with ferocity, throwing fireballs and trying to bite each other with their huge jaws. Obi was more agile, but Asita was stronger and more resilient. The battle lasted for hours, and it seemed that neither of the monsters would give in. Finally, Obi found an opportunity to attack while Asita was distracted by a fireball. She jumped on the giant beetle and bit it with her powerful jaws. Finally, after a long and bloody struggle, Asita was defeated and Obi emerged victorious. The caverns fell silent for the first time in a long time. The giant chicken looked with satisfaction at its fallen enemy before the echo of the fortress's activity resumed in the caverns. The intense life of the fortress attracted the most dangerous and ferocious beasts from the region. Aware of the danger they posed, the dwarves decided to take measures to protect themselves without giving up the excitement of observing them. With the new crystal furnace technology, they built windows in every room to safely watch these creatures through the thin green crystal. This way, if they were lucky, the dwarves could enjoy the impressive view of sharp fangs and lethal claws without having to worry about their lives. It was a perfect way to feed their passion for adventure and excitement without risking their safety. After being expelled from the crossbow squad and locked in her cell by the mayor, Obok slowly recovers from her injuries. However, the curse that afflicts her seems to have deeply affected her, especially after having all her armor removed, leaving her completely naked and exposed. Despite the efforts of her friends and family to help her, Obok feels humiliated and ashamed, and her emotional state worsens each day. The mayor has ordered clothes to be brought for her, but it seems too late for Obok. She often flies into rages and attacks visitors, worrying everyone who knows her. They have tried to seek medical help, but so far nothing has worked. Obok seems to have completely lost her mind, and her future is uncertain. Many fear that she may never recover from the curse and that she will end her life in a cell, alone and desperate. The atmosphere in the forge was stifling. The heat emanating from the furnaces was almost unbearable. Despite that, the dwarves worked tirelessly to ensure that the process of making the new armors was perfect. The constant sound of hammers hitting anvils mixed with the sound of metal melting and the hiss of lava meeting water. Finally, the last two holes of the forge were filled with hot lava, and the manufacturing process came to an end. The soldiers of the Seabreak squad hurried to equip themselves with the new, shiny iron armors, while the rest of the dwarves watched with pride the result of their hard work. Shortly after, all the soldiers were fully equipped, each with their favorite weapon ready to be used in the defense of the fortress. Following the successful production of the new iron armors, the team in charge of exploration and material collection decided to focus their attention on crafting cages and complex mechanisms to capture possible creatures inhabiting the magma lake. With total dedication and tireless effort, they built various traps that were set around the retractable floor of the lava collection area. Each trap was carefully designed to maximize the chances of catching the creatures and minimize any risk to the team members. Once all the traps were in place, the doors were closed and the retractable floor was removed to allow access to any brave beast that ventured there. The team eagerly awaited the moment when one of the creatures would fall into the traps, as it would allow them to carry out a detailed study and exhaustive analysis of each one. Capturing the creatures would be a significant achievement for the team, as it would enable them to expand their knowledge about the species living in that hostile and potentially dangerous environment. After spending long days behind bars, the long-awaited moment of Obok's release arrived. However, the outcome was not what was expected, as Obok's anger and indignation towards the mayor, who had come to set her free, unleashed a violent attack by the former prisoner. In an act of self-defense, the mayor responded and, unfortunately, ended up taking Obok's life. The tragic news of her death spread quickly throughout the dwarf community, leaving them shocked by the situation. Despite everything, they understood that death was the best thing that could have happened to Obok, as it was preferable to die than to live in chains, no matter how beautiful they might be. Obok was buried alongside the other deceased in an act of respect and tribute to her memory. After installing the last 2 specialized kilns for the artisanal crafting of clay and pottery, equipping the soldiers and resolving internal issues, the fortress doors open again and the merchant Ast is the first to arrive. Ast approached the mayor with news that could change the course of the war against the goblins. To the south of their position, there was a goblin fortress that had been taken by a few dwarves from the Lens of the Rock, who had managed to escape from their captivity. These brave dwarves had named their fortress Glovetmute in honor of the fortress they had lost. If this information was true, it was excellent news. The capture of a second settlement meant doubling the chances of survival and perhaps over time gaining even more military power. The mayor listened attentively to Ast's words, and her face lit up with the news. It was a unique opportunity for the dwarves to gain an advantage in the war against the goblins. She decided it was time to act and sent an urgent message to the fortress to establish contact, seeking details and making plans to send a squad of dwarves immediately. The news of the capture of Glovetmute spread. It was a sign of hope amidst an endless war. There was talk of how the victory at Fort Glovetmute could change the course of the war and lead to the recovery of their lost fortress. The entire clan was excited and ready to join the fight. After much deliberation, the decision was finally made to send the second most veteran squad, the Rock Host, to defend Fort Glovetmute. However, the experienced soldiers of the Internal Guard would not go on the mission, as it was decided to leave the top 10 men at home to protect and assist the rookies. The task would not be easy, as the fort was situated in a key strategic location and was a top priority target for the enemies. But if the Rock Host could hold the fort, it would gain a great strategic advantage for the Allied forces. Although some soldiers might consider it a suicide mission, the brave men of the Rock Host were willing to face any obstacle to fulfill their duty. After bidding farewell to their loved ones, they embarked on the journey with some supplies, knowing they had no idea when or even if they would return. Thus, the Rock Host set off for Fort Glovetmute, hoping to defend it until they had their own troops and defenses to protect themselves. This was a crucial mission for the Allied forces, and everyone hoped that the bravery and experience of the Rock Host would be enough to achieve victory. Thank you for watching this chapter. See you in the next one. Bye.